A pleasant day to everyone. These are the results of the monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. This report will answer the following. 1. Did the schools implement their Be-Lcps? 2. Did the schools comply with DepEd assessment guidelines? 3. Did the schools complete the required most essential learning competencies? 4. Did the learners meet expectations during the implementation of the Be-Lcp? 5. Did the division meet its target on the reproduction and distribution of SLMs? 6. Did the division meet its targets in providing supplementary feeding to identified learners? 7. Did our stakeholders or partners support the implementation of Be-Lcp? 8. Was the implementation of the Be-Lcp effective in ensuring learning continuity? To answer the first question, did the schools implement their Be-Lcps? The answer is yes. Based on the survey that we conducted, most of the indicators of Be-Lcp implementation were rated strongly agree by the respondents with ensuring the availability of learning materials and information dissemination through posting of signages and flowcharts receiving the highest percentage. However, few participants rated strongly disagree on the following: ensuring the availability of resources for teachers such as internet connectivity for ODL, self-learning modules for MDL, and other teaching materials, and the school head conducting professional meetings with teachers via Zoom app, Google Meet, or through other virtual platforms to disseminate DFTAT's technical inputs relative to the Be-Lcp adjustment. 2. Be-Lcp is being fully implemented in the schools. The implementation was strongest in terms of ensuring the availability of learning materials, conduct of orientation to stakeholders, and information dissemination, posting of signages and flowcharts. However, further improvement is needed in the accomplishment of reflection journals of teachers and students. 3. Among the major gaps and issues identified by the respondents were the difficulty in ensuring the full and sustained cooperation and participation of the stakeholders, late submission of outputs, and difficulty in the retrieval and distribution of modules, and difficulty on communication and transportation. For the recommendations, recommendation is given on the intensified provision of technical assistance by the SDO personnel on the following areas. 1. Accomplishment of reflection journals by the teachers and students. 2. Ensuring the availability of resources for teachers, such as but not limited to internet connectivity for ODL, self-learning modules for MDL, and other teaching materials. 3. Conduct of professional meetings by the school head to teachers via Zoom app, Google Meet, or through other virtual platforms to disseminate DFTAT's technical inputs relative to LCP adjustment. 4. Ensuring full and sustained cooperation and participation of stakeholders, especially the parents, in guiding their children in the accomplishment of the learning tasks. 5. Ensuring timely submission of outputs from the learners and that learning materials are taken and retrieved on time. And 6. Facilitating communication and transportation. On assessment, did the schools comply with DepEd assessment guidelines? The answer is yes. Based on the survey that we conducted, schools in the division have an outstanding compliance in terms of their implementation of the Division Assessment Program anchored on the National Assessment Framework, DepEd Order 8 Series of 2015 and DepEd Order 31 Series of 2020. The indicators which obtain the highest ratings include communicating to learners and parents or guardians the design and standards for grading assessment, use of written works to assess essential knowledge and understandings, teachers ensuring that procedure and expected timeline are explained well, maximizing available communication options in the giving of feedback, use of technology in the development, communication, implementation, and grading of assessment tasks, and monitoring and evaluation of the school head of the implementation of DO 31 Series of 2020 at least once every quarter. 3. The indicators which obtained the lowest mean ratings include parents guiding their children in accomplishing the assessment tasks and/or monitoring tools designed by their teacher, design of assessments in distance learning modalities such that learners are able to answer them asynchronously and have open access to various sources, use of check-ins of teacher with learners during assessment period, giving of remediation by the 5th week of any quarter to learners who earn raw scores consistently below expectation in summative assessments, and submission of the quarterly report on the implementation of DO 31 Series of 2020 to the school's division office. 4. The best practices that the schools have on the implementation of DO 31 Series of 2020 include constant communication through all means possible with parents and learners, allowing flexibility in the accomplishment of the learning tasks, use of creative and varied assessment strategies, careful monitoring of learners' progress, engaging stakeholders especially in the distribution and retrieval of modules, and providing intervention to struggling learners. 5. The challenges or issues encountered on the implementation of DO 31 Series of 2020 include late or non-submission of learning outputs, lack of enough support and guidance by the parents to their children, difficulty in communicating with parents and learners due to lack of gadgets or other means of communication, questionable validity and authenticity of the submitted outputs, and difficulty in assessing performance tasks. Among the actions taken to address the challenges and issues encountered include constant reminding, orientation, education to parents on the importance and ways of helping their children in accomplishing their learning tasks, involving stakeholders, PTA, barangay officials, religious organizations, etc., on the communication with and monitoring of the learners, allowing flexibility on the submission of outputs, provision of intervention activities to struggling learners, and using varied means in validating submitted outputs. For the recommendations, 1. Ensuring sustainability of the outstanding compliance to DO 31 Series of 2020 during this time of crisis through regular monitoring and evaluation of concerned CID and SGOD personnel. 2. Ensuring sustainability and enhancement of the identified best practices on the implementation of DO 31 Series of 2020 through provision of needed technical assistance, giving of recognition, and provision of benchmarking activities. 3. Provision of technical assistance by the concerned CID and or SGOD personnel to schools on the following concerns. A. Parents guiding their children in accomplishing the assessment tasks and or monitoring tools designed by their teacher. B. Design of assessments in distance learning modalities such that learners are able to answer them asynchronously and have open access to various sources. C. Use of check-ins of teacher with learners during assessment period. D. Giving of remediation by the 5th week of any quarter to learners who earn raw scores consistently below expectation in summative assessments. E. Submission of the quarterly report on the implementation of DO31 series of 2020 to the school's division office. F. Late or non-submission of learning outputs by the learners. G. Lack of enough support and guidance by the parents to their children. H. Difficulty in communicating with parents and learners due to lack of gadgets or other means of communication. I. Questionable validity and authenticity of the submitted outputs. And lastly, difficulty in assessing performance tasks. On the completion of the MELCs, did the schools complete the required most essential learning competencies as of the second quarter? The answer is yes. 100% of the schools completed the second quarter MELCs of SY 2020 to 2021. Those which did not complete on the original timeline completed the MELCs during the extension period. Learners meeting expectations. Did the learners meet expectations during the implementation of the Be-Lcp? The answer is yes, 96.65% of them. In elementary, 99.33% met expectations. 0.70 did not meet expectations and 0.46% are at risk of failing. In junior high school, 96.05% met expectations, 3.93% did not meet expectations, and 1.42 are at risk of failing. In senior high school, 94.54% have passed or met expectations, 5.44% did not meet expectations, and 2.93% are at risk of failing. On the reproduction and distribution of SLMs, did the division meet its target on the reproduction and distribution of SLMs? The answer is yes. Centrally developed SLM printing status got 100% funded by Bayanihan 1, while centrally developed SLM distribution status was also 100%. Locally developed SLM distribution status was 100%. And locally developed SLM printing status was 100%. For SLM in senior high school, centrally developed SLM printing status was 100%. Locally developed SLM printing status was 100% for both Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2. Centrally developed SLM distribution status was 100%. Locally developed SLM distribution status was 100% in Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2. On school-based feeding program, did the division meet its targets in providing supplementary feeding to identified learners? The answer is yes. On hot meals, dry ration or nutritious food, status of procured nutritious food is 100%. Status of schools completed feeding is 100%. Status of learners completed feeding cycle is 100%. For FY 2019, on milk feeding, status of procured milk or commercial milk 100%. Status of schools completed milk distribution 100%. Status of learners completed milk feeding cycle 100%. For FY 2020, Status of procured milk, commercial milk, 100%. But the status of schools completed milk distribution and status of learners completed milk feeding cycle are both 0% because they are still ongoing. On stakeholder support, did our stakeholders or partners support the implementation of Be-Lcp? The answer is yes. The financial monetary in Philippine peso absolute value donated by our stakeholders amounted to 3,325,769 pesos and 45 centavos. For the non-monetary peso equivalent, it amounted to 3,806,815 pesos and 10 centavos. So the total financial equivalent of the support or donations was 7,532,584 pesos and 55 centavos. On learning continuity, was the implementation of the Be-Lcp effective in ensuring learning continuity? The answer is yes. For SY 2019 to 2020, based on January 5, 2020 data, our enrollment was 55,417. For SY 2020 to 2021, based on May 24, 2021 data, our enrollment was 58,734. So we have an additional enrollment this year of 3,314. So we provided learning continuity, we ensured learning continuity to 58,731 learners. In summary, 1. All schools in the division implemented their Be-Lcps. 2. All schools in the division complied with DepEd assessment guidelines. 3. All schools in the division completed the required MELCs as of the second quarter of SY 2020 to 2021. 4. Most of the learners met expectations during the implementation of the Be-Lcp. 5. The division met its targets on the reproduction and distribution of SLMs. 6. The division met its targets in providing supplementary feeding to identified learners. 7. Our stakeholders or partners provided monetary and non-monetary support for the implementation of the Be-Lcp. And 8. The implementation of the Be-Lcp was effective in ensuring continuity of learning for the students. For the recommendations, 1. May provide necessary technical assistance or support to identified areas for improvement and for the enhancement of the identified strengths. 2. May consider more sustainable learning delivery modalities aside from the MDL with proper consideration of the feedback of the school personnel, parents or guardians, students and other stakeholders, and the prevailing IATF guidelines. According to Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones, but what other options do we have? We have to go on because education must continue. Thank you for listening.